For example, used to spend a lot of time meditating, and I realized that no matter how long I meditated for, it didn't actually help me have a good relationship with my wife. I had just gotten married when and so I realized, there are these different skill sets, these different orientations to life, and I'm going to have to take on all of them. I can't just sit around and meditate all day.
Blaise, thank you so much for joining us. I am excited to hear your story. You are going to speak to us today about consciousness and healing. So, before we get into that, can you just share a little bit of background about who are you and what got you started on this path?
Yeah, where do you start your background? Well, I would start it with that I'm Canadian. I was born in Vancouver. I never really considered consciousness or trauma in a serious way until I absolutely had to. I really wanted to be a normal person and do really normal things, the things that were reflected in my culture. Um, yep, I had a lot of difficulties as a child, and I wasn't able to achieve very much. And I felt this great gap between my potential and my my what my life actually looked like. And I suffered a bunch of setbacks, one including that I had a parent die. My father died when I was 12 years old. Again, I didn't know about trauma or the impact that this had on me. No one in my culture knew. The only thing that I knew that you could do to improve your life was like, I don't know, work harder or take steps moving forward in life. But no matter what, I just was always behind, really developmentally behind as a teen and a young person. I ended up having problems with drugs because I didn't have any skills and life was not very interesting for me the way I was living. When I was 24, I I kind of hit the end point of that. And I found actually that I met some people that were really interested in or one person in particular who was really interested in the Kabbalah. And I remember sitting one day thinking, as my life's kind of falling apart, I just accepted that I was going to go to treatment. And it just kind of hit me, oh, I'm going to get into spirituality. I think that's really all that's left in life for me. And it just would seem like the clearest realization that I could have had. That's the next thing that I'm going to do. I didn't know anything about it. I had no skills, but that's really where it all started. So I went to treatment for drug addiction for 5 months. When I went in, I remember thinking, I've wasted my whole life. Like, I'm so far behind. And in treatment, you're confronted with people who are also have the same situation, and many of them who are much older than me. And I had this huge reversal happen where actually all of a sudden I felt like I was way ahead. I felt grateful to be having this forced and tremendous life change. Um, and I felt really grateful for it. And what I found was, again, I had this idea that I was going to get into spirituality, but I didn't know anything about it. I didn't have a clear sense of it. I found that I loved being in treatment. I loved the process. It was the first kind of like project that I really could sink my intelligence into. So I'd wanted to be a musician. I'd wanted to be whatever, a writer. I'd wanted to be great in all the ways my culture had reflected that, but I didn't really have the discipline for it. I didn't, that's not actually what I wanted to do. And when I went to treatment, people started to talk about feelings and just the process of being in self-reflection. And I thought, wow, this is fascinating. And I just discovered I had like an endless appetite and discipline for it. And so I really discovered hard work there. I discovered a work ethic, like to do something out of joy that's difficult. And it sort of she started to change my identity. That I sort of saw myself as I could say a good person who was moving in a good direction, who had a clear path. And the feeling of that was so pleasant after my whole life had been like, there's something wrong with me. I don't know what it is, but there's something wrong with me. To finally having some clarity, I I was thrilled. It was the most exciting thing ever. So that's where it started. And during this interview, I'd like to pause a lot just because I don't want to just talk and talk and talk. So yeah, we'll pause there. That's my start.
Sure.
Started.
Wow. So you just wanted to be normal. What is normal?
Yeah, well, my name's Blaise. I wanted to have a normal name. I wanted to, yeah, I don't know, people had normal names. My parents were not together. I wanted my parents to be together. I wanted to have nice clothes, and I wanted to not feel bad, shameful, wrong. I didn't really consider how I actually felt. I just thought about the things that I could have or get that might make me feel better. That's
Yeah.
basically, I looked from the outside, I looked out at the world and I thought, how do I get things that are going to make me feel good? And the challenge that I had is that I was really not good at that. That was my big predicament. There are people in this world who are really good. I marvel at it, at acquiring things that make them feel good. There are people who are extremely successful in this regard. And if I had been successful, well, then I may not have ever done what I'm doing now. But normal would have been something like, I don't know, being smart, praised, attractive, having money, doing all the right things socially, making good choices, all of those, some combination of all of those things. Yeah.
It's amazing because a lot of people are wanting to be different and you're trying to fit in.
Well, I think I probably
Which,
wanted to be different and fit in. I had my own take on it. You know, everybody finds their way to try and to do it. But I did what I did not have a concept of is there is something essentially good about yourself that you can develop by paying attention to it. I just had no concept of that. In my school, everything felt like the way you learn or you advance in life is by looking outside of yourself. That's the basic premise. My inner world was so not capable of doing that. It was so underdeveloped that really never worked for me. So I
yeah,
just didn't, it never occurred to me until I went to treatment that I could actually turn my attention on myself as a way to improve my life. That just had never really occurred to me.
yeah. So how does your life look like now?
Well, the first thing is I would say is like I can't, I'm not able to stop looking at myself. So at first, at first I decided I needed to start looking at myself, and now everything feels like that. So that would be where it started. The sense of presence is continuous. It's the only thing that's really real. It's the dominant experience of life as being and feeling and experiencing. In the worldly sense, I am married. I have three children. I just had my third child, my first son. I have children. My daughter's going to be 7, and I have a 5-year-old, and I have a baby, brand new 1 month old. And
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. My wife stays at home and is very busy, and I work with people from all over the world on the internet and in person. Maybe annually we have retreats, and I teach about the things that I've learned by paying attention to myself. And that they take, we can get more into the specifics of what that is, but that's what I do for a living. And
Hmm.
it's the greatest thing. It's so wonderful. I love it so much. It's a perfect pairing for me.
Yeah. Well, I think once you're on the spiritual path, you can't go back. It's like
Yeah.
the airbags have exploded out of the car. You can't push them back in. Once you've seen, you can't unsee.
Hmm.
And then it's surprising when other people can't see. It's like it's so obvious. But what if there were to be a main message you'd want from people for people to get from this conversation? What is it that you want them to get from this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, There in the spiritual marketplace, there are so many products that you can buy, so many services, so many techniques, so many practices. I think what I am most excited about is is to build a life that allows you and a sort of spiritual life that allows you to take on all of the facets together. I think that for example, you can have a spiritual practice that has a very specific aim or a very specific goal. But if you get there, as you get there, all the other facets, all of the other elements of life are still going to be there. And in the world that I grew up in, spirituality and personal development and worldly success and the manifestation and past life regression, all these things are kind of in these different camps. And some people do this and some people do that. I think what the impulse of my life has been is really to take on all of those things, is that they all fit together. They're all important. I don't think it's possible to stake your happiness on one facet of reality. I think the opportunity of life is to take on as much as you possibly can. And I feel very fortunate as I was a young person when I decided I was going to get into spirituality. I mean this in the most loving way. My problems were so significant that I couldn't avoid them. I had to figure out how to take on my problems at the same time. And I got really involved in understanding trauma, which is it's a big conversation, the impact of trauma, and then really necessity of knowing about this as a personal, ancestral, and collective phenomenon. I got really interested in non-duality and direct path teachings. And from very early on, I realized like I can't just focus on one of these elements of life and expect to be happy and well. For example, used to spend a lot of time meditating, and I realized that no matter how long I meditated for, it didn't actually help me have a good relationship with my wife. I had just gotten married and so I realized, there are these different skill sets, these different orientations to life, and I'm going to have to take on all of them. I can't just sit around and meditate all day. So this is my main message, is that there are so many interconnected aspects of consciousness which support each other. And I think when I see people who get stuck or who have challenges, most often it's because they're not able to recognize that their challenges lie in a different domain that they're not aware of, and they continue to try to sit through or whatever the challenge of their life is, rather than meeting it with the appropriate skill set that you need to have. So over the course of my teaching or in my life in general, just my orientation to what is meaningful in life just keeps broadening and broadening and broadening. And for me, this is the joy of a spiritual life, is that it just grows forever. It's like a bouquet of life, a cornucopia, a fullness of life that just forever is going to get richer. And that the joy is, yes, there are pressures to feel certain kinds of release and have realizations, but generally speaking, this is going to go on forever, and it's a wonderful joy to be enriched by the entire process, to have an integrated, full, rich life that takes on all those domains. And this is what I orient the people that I work with to. This is what I teach. This is what I believe to be a really important part of especially contemporary spiritual practice.
I love that, because so many people just focus on the one area, and you don't know what you don't know until you find out, hey, I'm missing that.
Yeah,
And like you said, it could just be an ancestral thing and not even something you're carrying. It could be somebody else's stuff and you don't know about it. So you think there's something wrong with me. I need to fix me, fix me, fix me the whole time.
yeah,
Instead of letting it go and say, doesn't belong to me
yeah,
or whatever.
absolutely. What I
Yeah.
find myself wanting to tell people all the time is that the reason things change is because they're experienced clearly. And that's because I don't believe the universe creates any experience by mistake. All of it is meant to be experienced. And when we want to get rid of something or when we want to change something, we often don't want to look at it. We don't want to understand it, which is to deny its essential function. So whatever it is, whether it's you consider it to be ancestral or not, it's begging to be understood. It's begging to be experienced and to be integrated and learned from. And so to do that, there absolutely are techniques and skills that allow you to relax very deeply, and those are really essential. But we have to be able to know our entire map of consciousness. We have to get very familiar with the entire terrain because it is there to be experienced. That's what makes it, that's why things remain incomplete, is because they haven't been experienced yet. So having a proactive, joyful exploration of life rather than a passive waiting for things to change attitude is what I tend to promote. Because as you say, you don't know what you don't know. So then my job is to help people to see the things about life that they don't know yet. And there are so many of them. There's so many facets of life that we can discover. So how would we know which ones to do next? Well, usually our path is progressive. Usually there's one thing that we're focused on now, which bleeds into another, which expands into another. And over time, our map of like, what is my spiritual path? What is my work? What is my identity? What is my purpose? This grows and grows and grows as we get a broader and broader understanding of what is here in life.
Yeah, I definitely think you need to be able to have an open mind and not be closed. You know, the first book I ever read on spirituality was Neil Donald Walsh, Conversations with God.
Mm.
And right in the beginning, it says, if you read this book, it was not an accident. And I thought, whoa, hang on. No, how did they know? And that just blew my mind. I mean, like those days, there weren't many books available. Now you can find so much, but it's the next step. It's the next step. Where to now? You don't need to know it all. You just need to know what now, what next.
And have a way and have some skills. Again, this is how I emphasize, have some skills like that I develop skills to work with different parts of my life or different parts of my process. So this is what I would emphasize. Can I just name for me, like it gets reflected in my life and in my work. There were sort of three things that I really needed to have. And one was I couldn't have told you what it was called. I needed to become enlightened. I didn't know what that meant. It's a kind of a funny thing to say, I want to be enlightened, but you can't know what that means. So you want something that you don't understand. Well, how do you know you want it? Because you just have this need to this drive, this thing that in you that will not be at rest until you know the truth. And whatever words you want to put to that. So I had that. And I had a very strong desire personally to achieve something, to participate, to express my potential. And so a part came from the fact that I had so many challenges in life, but I wanted to do something, like that really mattered to me and that really felt complete. I really wanted to do that. And the third thing is I had so many sort of pains and challenges relationally, like I had to figure out how to deal with that. I had to have a better, healthier relationship to myself and to other people. So those are the three main things. And the last thing I think that developed more over time, especially that came into focus, is I needed to find, like, not only was I doing something that was authentic to me or valuable to me, but that was part of the well-being of this planet. That was the last thing that started to really take off for me, was a real care for what is going on here on Earth and finding my place in that. Not just doing what's authentic for me, but really doing something that's uh, coherent with what's good for life, doing something that's contributing to the planet. Those would be the four things. So that's what I teach. I teach people about how to awaken in a traditional sense, how to know the truth of life. That may be going through all the dimensions or stages in consciousness. People often start in very different places and have very different doors. I teach about relationship and specifically trauma, the experience of our family and our early child development, as well as the sort of ancestral and family history that we have as well. I teach about the soul and the purpose of the incarnation, the fact that each of us is a sort of arrival of light into this world that has the potential to bring more information and intelligence and to be expressed. And I teach about collective consciousness. These are the four domains. And so these are the four things. I mean, there's probably more that other people would name and think of that are essential, but these are the four things that are essential to me that I consider to be the fundamentals of a spiritual life.
Yeah. So who are the people that mostly come to see you?
At first, it was spiritual seekers. So I think that's still primarily true. These are people who have worked with teachers in the past. They're already on their journey. They already had some level of awakening. They already were pretty developed in their practice. And what I have a particular specialty or skill is in helping people work through the stuff that comes up. So I'm just given my background and understanding and training in trauma and my vast personal experience. This is where I'm most useful. So people come to me because I can relate to what's happening in their bodies and in their consciousness clearly, and that I have this way of creating connection. So whereas many spiritual traditions basically say, just sit it out, or just feel it, or just let it go, I offer people a place to express. Because I think the nature of emotion and the nature of the stuff that we carry, it is created by design to be expressed. I don't just have anger to feel angry, and that's part of it, but I have anger to express and communicate. And so I have a way, I'm very available to teach people, I should say first to receive people and to see what life is like for them, to receive how they have experienced life, but also to teach them the ability to communicate rather than just to sort of let their stuff go, but to actually find ways to express it and have it move actively by communication. So I think when I began, people came to me because they were spiritual seekers who had a real interest in learning how to do that. They had a need for that in themselves. Often they find that they have patterns that they don't understand, or challenges which don't really go away just because they have a meditation practice. And that was my kind of primary orientation. I also used to teach a lot about traditional awakening practices. I do now, but that's it's kind of taken a back seat. I used to teach a lot about meditation and awareness and the different levels of consciousness. But for the first period of time, these spiritual seekers were really hungry for relationship and connection and an understanding of trauma. So that this is where I'm probably most proficient, or most where I offer something most unique, is my orientation to trauma and the stuff that we are trying to work through. So that it started with spiritual seekers, but it expanded into all kinds of people that may or may not be have a meditation practice or in any kind of personal development. What I found when I started is I had this kind of method. I said, you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. And what I found was that if you take 100 people, if I sit with 100 people, not everybody's actually going to go through that sequence. Actually, the things that are alive for people, what the next step is, what people have aptitudes for, the aspects of consciousness which people are really close to realizing, are vastly different. Now, some people are, you can talk about awareness and they'll go, bam, awareness, empty space, makes perfect sense, all the sense in the world. You can talk to other people about their soul or other qualities of consciousness, and it's the same. And so I started to think, how do you create an education platform that really meets many different people where they are, that allows people to come into a community and be celebrated for where they are and supported for where they are, even though that may be very different from where the other people are. So my community, uh, I guess we could say there are people who are not traditional spiritual seekers who just maybe have a lot of pain or challenge in their life, or people who just there's something wrong. There's something that they need to address. And I found a way to integrate all of those people. I think for the most part, the people that see me, what I'm very grateful for is that they are very committed and they are very serious and they spend a lot of time and energy. And as a result, they do really well, right? They
Yeah.
people who really care and who are supported in their education, they do really well. So that's the sort of primary thing. People may not start off with a strong sense of that, but it grows. It's really beautiful to watch it grow with people.
Yeah, and I guess everybody's at a different level of development, so you'll meet them where they're at.
Everybody's at a different level of development, but probably already said this, but I would go even a step further. I used to think of development as being sort of like a linear hierarchy. Like everybody starts at A and then they go to B and then they go to C and then they go to D. I don't find that to be true at all. I feel like there are people who start at D and there are people who start at B. And I don't have much of a preference as which one is better anymore. Like I just sat with somebody, if you are really focused on your early life experience, like the beginning of your life and the relational environment that was created, let's go there. That's what's alive for you. That's where you need to go. And they may think, oh, I should be off doing something fancy and spiritual, but I don't think they should be. If they should be, then that's what they would be doing, but they're not. This is what they're doing. So this is what we should be doing. And because I can hold such a big map for people that I have no need for them to be somewhere different than they are. And so I really help people value, I think, where they are and not try to be somewhere different. And there are other people who, like, we may not get to their early life experience for a while because we're off doing something else. But my map of reality says all levels, we're going to have to touch into all of them eventually. So if we're not doing it now, we'll just do it later. That's it. And so as a teacher, that's my job, is to hold a really big map of all the places that we could go, which is always getting bigger, and to go where they're going, go with them there, and to celebrate what they are opening into, and then to help them figure out how does that connect to all the other parts of themselves, and how does this aspect integrate into whatever their personal practice or what else they want. And what I see is that over time, people go from having a kind of a rigid, I need to be doing this. I need to realize this. This is the thing, I want to do what other people are doing, essentially, to really valuing and seeing their own path clearly. And as a result, ultimately, yeah, I think we like our path better than we like other people's by virtue of that's what we are supposed to be doing, right? It feels right. So this is a big part of what I'm doing, is trying to help people really celebrate whatever it is that they are doing in life. And so as a community, I think it's really beautiful because we have such a diversity. Like when we all get together, you hear one person can be really alive for, I don't know, something that's happening for them. And we go, that's wonderful. And another person says something completely different. And we're really there. And it's that kind of diversity and flexibility and ability to meet people wherever they are that's what I look really to cultivate, yeah, as a sort of a practice in our community. Otherwise, you just have like a who's the most awake community, who's the most whatever community. And I don't think that that's actually very valuable. I think what's really valuable is to celebrate the unique life journey that we are all on. I think it's actually the most effective way too. I don't think it helps to try to be more awake.
Yeah. Well, it's about bringing people together, not trying to separate yourselves.
That's
Um,
yeah.
I'd like to speak a little bit about trauma because I think, when people say, oh, we must go back to our childhood, there we go again. Yet another
Yeah.
person talking about that.
Yeah.
Just share with us a bit how important it is to go and heal the childhood wounds, and what are those childhood wounds?
Yeah. So first, uh, for example, when my father died, I was 12 years old. The concept of trauma did not even exist. No one really thought or knew what trauma was for me. And this is a really kind of strong example. Most people would say, "Oh, now of course, like, well, your father died. Of course, that was traumatic. We understand that." I think as we go through time, we are becoming more aware of what trauma actually is. It started with soldiers coming back from war. People could go, "Oh, wow, that must be traumatic." And it was these really intense life experiences. But up until that time, we grew up in a world that did not identify what was happening to people. It could not see. Consciousness was at a place that could not really see what was happening to people. So we've grown up in a world that doesn't know very much about trauma at all, that there's not enough clarity or transparency in consciousness to really see what is happening. It's like I only take my car in when it starts knocking or when there's a big problem. I have no idea what's going on under the hood. So I think for most people, trauma is like some sort of hidden phenomenon that happens to some people, and we see these really intense examples of it, like in my life, and we think, well, of course that's trauma. But the more that consciousness clarifies, meaning the more that we move through into the future, because consciousness is becoming more transparent, the more that we move into the future, the more we are going to realize that the structure of our reality is trauma. Like that, there's no escaping. It's not conditional. It is when you get in a car accident or when you have a parent die. It is all those things. But the actual structure of our human experience is trauma. And at first you go, like, what does that mean? And I'll speak about it. But if you look at the world, like the world that we consider to be normal, that is a traumatized world. That's why the world is the way it is. So again, maybe we define what is trauma. Trauma is any experience which cannot be processed. And that means essentially two things. It's an overwhelming experience, and most often it can't move between people. I mean, it doesn't actually create connection. So in our bodies, you think of our bodies the same way you think of the cells in the human body. The cells in our human body are all relating to each other. They're all processing, they're all doing what their cellular processes, and they're all in relationship with each other. So trauma for me means two things. One, that the cell or the individual body cannot tolerate what it is experiencing. And the second thing is that there is no connection for this experience, that it cannot send and receive information and becomes isolated and separated. So the way that the consciousness, as an individual, but also collectively, the way that consciousness deals with this is it freezes, it takes energy and it freezes around something that is moving, like an emotion, and it freezes it and hardens around it in a way that allows us to not see it. And where there was an overwhelming feeling, there is now a numbness. And in this numbness, we are no longer able to be present in ourselves. So this happens through human development, just as a simple model. As I grow up, I have all these pockets of incomplete experiences, essentially. So if I feel as a young person, I feel afraid, and this is too much for me, I harden around the fear, I freeze it, and then I don't feel afraid anymore. But I'm not actually disconnected to my body, or I'm not connected to my body. So this is one aspect of it. But because our world has been so traumatized, the other problem is that the people who raise us, our parents, our teachers, they are traumatized. They are frozen, which means that we are growing up into a world that's really not alive and conscious and present, that can't see us and can't relate to us. So the secondary thing is, not only is life overwhelming for me, but I'm growing up in a world that can't actually see and receive my energy. So in this way, I also become frozen. So I'm going to get to your question. Your question is, how important is it to to go back and to do this. Uh, wherever wherever there is this frozen energy, it blocks the passage of light. So our soul and all of the high potential, all of the things that exist in the higher potential of consciousness, it can only incarnate when there is a live, integrated, coherent experience in the sort of maybe call it fifth dimension, in the living felt sense of our world, in the place where we care and we have drives and we feel fear and we have joy. When that is alive, light can land in the world. When that is fragmented and frozen, the light cannot pass through. And so if I were to name what the biggest problem in the world is, it is the frozen, fragmented nature of the sort of felt sense of the fifth dimension, which we feel as our bodies, and the lack of light that is able actually to arrive in this world to illuminate it, to bring light into the world. So how important is it to do this work? It's really essential to having a better future. There's really no way to have a better future without having more light in the world. And the only way you can have more light in the world is if you're able to thin the membrane that we experience in our sort of humanity that can allow more light to incarnate into this world. So this is true for individuals. This is true for any individual. If you want to have a better life, you have to have more, you have to embody more light. That's really the only way. And you have to have all the facets of your nervous system, all of the parts of your human development need to be online and awake and integrated so that when you take action in the world, you take it from the fullest, most developed self, adult self that you can. Most people, pretty much everybody knows what it's like. You're going along, you're acting as an adult, and suddenly you get triggered, and then essentially you are acting from the past. You're acting from a childish part of yourself that is undeveloped. And so the human world, our lives, our ability to navigate the world is fraught because we continue to have these places in ourself where we regress into sort of frozen pain or the fragmentation of our nervous system. So my highest potential, if I were to define what my highest potential is as a human being, it's that my nervous system and my sort of all my emotional centers, you could say my chakras, are integrated. And so when I take action in the world, I take action from the fullness of myself. I'm not in conflict. I'm a sort of symphony of development. I'm a symphony of all the things I've learned as a human being. So this is like my fullest human self. And in doing so, in being this way, I become a conductor for light, which means that my soul can actually arrive and land and shine through in the world. Which means I can recognize my soul and my soul qualities, what I'm bringing into this world, and I'm clear in my direction. So this would be what is really required for the person. As a planet, if you look at collectively, we have the same challenge. You could think about the human collective consciousness as a single body, which also has the same density in the felt sense in the fifth dimension, because there has been so much unprocessed experience in the history of humanity. And that this is blocking the amount of light that we experience globally, and it limits our ability to move towards a better future. So we move towards a future, but it remains a dark and fractured future unless we can find a way to bring more light into it. So it's essential for the development of an individual and essential for the development of the planet. And there are many spiritual paths that don't emphasize this part, that they say, if you learn to relax, if you learn to identify with the higher qualities of consciousness, things will sort of work themselves out. You know, there may be intense periods of feeling or whatever, but it will somehow work itself out. And I don't think that's true for most people. I think most people are going to have to actually get in there and relate to the things that are happening in life and will not be able to hold their focus in a sustained and transformative way in higher consciousness. And if you are able to do that, then wonderful. I mean, you don't need to listen to me, but in my experience, it's very, very useful to sort of get in there. And lastly, before I pause, in the world that we've lived in, our capacity to relate to trauma, as much as we're realizing trauma more, we have to deal with it more, and there's all this pain. Our capacity and our ability to resolve it is growing rapidly. So there's never been a better time to work with this stuff. If you had a teacher in the 60s or 80s or 90s or whenever, and they said sort of like all that psychology stuff is not very powerful, I can kind of see where they're coming from because I don't think our techniques to work with this stuff were particularly powerful back then. But that's changing really, really rapidly. And it's possible to have really precise and profound transformative experiences of trauma. And the more that we do that, the more that we clarify consciousness, it's just going to get easier and easier and easier and easier. And that means that it becomes more and more profitable for people to actually engage in those practices than ever before.
I love the way you explained that. And you're right, because I think with anything, when people first maybe started running, they couldn't run fast enough. Now they broke the 4-minute mile. And so it just becomes exponential. And also society, because they're traumatized, will re-traumatize people as well. So it is important, I think, for people as well. I mean, you've already said it, to heal so that they don't allow society to re-traumatize and they become part of a healthier society, creating a healthier society, creating a better future for the future generations as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you mentioned your community. What is it called? What is it that you do?
I don't know what it's called. It's just the people that gather around me. I mean, I have people that have been working with me for years now, and then new people come and I find a way to integrate them. It's the Blaise verse. I would never call it that because it sounds really weird, but it's just the people that have come to work with me. And when I teach, I I don't sit on a pedestal and just tell people the way it is. I create interactive practices. So this is another difference again between traditional uh, spiritual practice that you might see at a satsang or a meditation retreat and what I do is when you have those traditional teachings, like even Eckhart Tolle writing The Power of Now, there's one transmission and there's a bunch of people that are learning from the teacher. And what we are doing that is different is every community member becomes a resource. It's not about me. I mean, it's about me, obviously. I'm still the person who's teaching, but it's really about the integration of all the capacity of the group. What we're trying to do is create really healthy and strong, vibrant fields that can be very transparent, that can allow high levels of light to incarnate through the group. So there is a focus on interdependence, and there's a focus on developing the skills to actually relate to each other and be in service to your practice. It's true that these skills are also meant to help people with their families and their children, to be very practical. Meditation, I don't think, is particularly practical in life. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but like when your child comes to you and says that they are sad, or when your spouse comes to you and says that they're angry, or when your neighbor comes to you and says that they're disappointed, meditation is not going to give you a response to them that allows you to create connection and resolve your differences, right? So the skills that people have in resolving trauma, you could say body-based listening skills, are very useful in life. So I teach people skills that they can apply to their children, and they can be present and engaged in a way in every facet of their life. But even more so, within the community, people practice together, and they can really, in a practice space where both people have skill and are developed, it is amazing what can be done. So the community that I run, I work with people one-on-one, but as the community grows, it becomes ever more important that the people work with each other and become interdependent. And there's a huge benefit because then there's so many benefits. One is it's less expensive. One is that we can actually do more work. Also that these people have a community of people who know them and value them and that they can rely on. They have a sort of a whole world a sangha of people that they are really deeply connected to. And this becomes like their ground, like that we in our spiritual development, we are not individuals. We are grounded in our community, in our sangha. So the way that I've developed that is that, again, I just people have come to me, and then I teach at various different levels. I teach about personal consciousness, or I teach about trauma, or I teach about the soul, or any of the other things that I teach about. And people say to me, how do I keep doing this? And I find ways to have them join our core group. So it's all about learning. It's about finding if you're fit with what I'm doing, developing the skills that you need to participate, because it is skill based, and then being joyfully committed to long-term growth and development. That's how it's happened. And these people are probably mostly in the United States and in Europe, but yeah, everybody from all over the world is welcome.
That's amazing. And yeah, I see a lot of communities are coming up now, and the shifts already started happening where people are working together. That old way of doing things in competition to others is kind of patriarchal way of doing stuff. It's
Yeah.
fading out very fast.
Yeah.
Okay, so then, Blaise, how can people work with you? How do they get hold of
Yeah, I think two things. First, I have a website. It's my name, blaisekennedy.com, and that's how you would work with me. And I maybe we'll put this in the notes of the video, or you can find a way to connect people to that, but it's
you?
blaisekennedy.com. And the second thing is I have a YouTube channel, uh, Blaise here, where I make videos about all of these concepts. I go into detail about as much. There's so much terrain to cover. Everything from personal liberation to how to deal with trauma, to what is a soul, to the future of the humanity, everything I can think of. And that's my primary place to make content. So I'd love for people to be engaged in my work if they feel resonant, wherever they do, whether they watch my videos or whether they want to work with me personally. But in the work that I do, I tend to run groups. Every couple months, I run a new group, and I have some openings for working with people one-on-one as well, depending on what the fit is and what they're looking for.
Yeah, I'll post all your links below. When is the book coming out?
The book, you know what? I say this in a really weird way. I don't read. My wife reads a ton. One of my clients wrote a book, and I'm reading his book. So I am reading one book, but I generally don't read, and I haven't read since I sort of had an awakening. I used to read the classics, but I don't read anymore. So it feels weird to consider writing a book. I am not sure how I'm going to get this all out. I think YouTube is extraordinary in its ability to convey information. I think that's what I'm going to do for now. And, maybe it's true that everyone eventually writes a book, and maybe I'll write a book, but um, the other thing is I am so consistently having my mind blown and learning. And if I put it down in a book, like it's a that's a
That could
that's
be
a
part one.
yeah. If I'd wrote a book 5 years ago, I'd be like, that book is not
You
as
know,
important.
you know Wayne Dyer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He wrote books, and as he went along, he also evolved. So his later works are way more evolved than his earlier works. So you kind of grow with him.
Yeah. Yeah,
Not
maybe I
no
will
pressure.
write a book, but my next is a woman in your nation who is a video editor that I want to hire. Then my next thing is to make really engaging YouTube videos that's coming before a book.
Absolutely. Well, I agree with you. YouTube to me is the way to go. In fact, less people have got time to read, or they'll. It's okay to listen to a podcast because they can do something else while they're busy doing something else. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I will certainly let everybody know about you. Do you have a final message for our viewers before we go?
Thank you for listening. I wish you well wherever it is that you're going. And And if you ever talk to me, I'll give you a more personalized message that really suits uh, who it is that's sitting before me and where they are going.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah. The last thing is, yeah, just there's such a there's such an explosion of resources and teachers and teachings. And I know that especially early in the journey, people wonder, like, do I do this or do I do that? I think you should do the thing that feels like it resonates for you. So if you're looking for a teacher or teaching, do the thing that really speaks to you or really resonates with you, which may not be what I'm doing. And that in itself is a spiritual practice of looking at the menu of things and knowing what's actually in alignment for you. Then if you can do that, you're already doing your practice. So that's what I would use to guide yourself. If you hear something about, I don't know, trauma that really speaks to you, or connection, or the history of the earth, or the collective consciousness, or anything like that, then go in that direction. If you hear something about awareness or non-duality, do that. But just stay open-minded to all of those facets are going to have to come together, because you cannot live in one part of the universe. The whole purpose of the universe is to experience and to integrate all those experiences into one giant thing. So that's where we're all going.
Exciting times.
Exciting times.
Thank you. I enjoyed our conversation and I learned a lot.
Oh,
So
good. Thank you for the opportunity.